Welcome to the Production Masters Podcast, the philosophies and techniques behind making music according to the masters of music production. Hello everybody, welcome to the Production Masters Podcast. This is episode 000, where I'm going to describe what this podcast is all about, what my idea for it was, and what I plan to do into the future, and also a bit about myself. So to start with, my name's Owen Gillett. I'm primarily a music lover and a musician and an audio engineer. I'm from the band Ice Cocoon, which I started initially just playing all the instruments myself and writing all the music and recording it myself very badly onto 4-track cassettes at the time. Eventually progressed into being a full band where other musicians would play things, but I would still be the engineer and producer, deciding on exactly how I want it all to be. So after trying to record the best I could with the 4-track thing, I moved on to buying a Pro Tools system and then realizing I had absolutely no idea how to use it properly. So I moved on to studying at SAE for a while. Well, I got a diploma there, and then moved on to working in a recording studio for about 5 years in Adelaide, all the while recording my own bands and musical things and other people's bands, obviously, and learning as much as I could, just moving on, doing lots of listening and reading and experimenting, lots of trial and error, trying to work out where I was going with everything, what my ideas were for how I think music is best produced or how to get the best results. And eventually I reached a point where I felt great about that and was confident about that, and found my legs as a audio engineer and mixer. Which sort of brings us up to the purpose of the podcast. So back when I was working out my own production ethos, if you like, there was I would have loved to have had the resources available to me, like listening to Frederick Nordstrom talk about how he does things, or whoever it is, all these guys who I've looked up to, like Cameron Webb, Mike Fraser, Bob Katz, people that have been instrumental in mashing together to create my perspective on production, I guess, or being part of that, along with all my own trial and error and my own experimentation and all the rest of it. So there was no YouTube back then. Now there is, obviously. So I thought, why not? Now I can do this. The internet's here. We can talk to these guys, coming from the perspective of what all the things are that I find make music recording and production and engineering exciting. What I found along the way is that a lot of these engineers, all these points converge. Like my own story and experiences really end up becoming quite similar or parallel to what these guys have all done. And I hope that you get something out of that too, in that either if you're still starting out, you hear just great amounts of information in lots of very relevant areas of music making and production and engineering, mixing and mastering, etc., and that helps you to build your perspective on how things could be, or just food for thought and all of that stuff. Or I think even if you're established and you've been doing this for ages, I also think that it'll be quite validating to hear that a lot of your struggles or a lot of things that you think or conclusions that you've come to are shared across the board, that these people all have very similar end goals in mind, even if they've had different ways of achieving it and getting there. So the format of this podcast: interviews that last about an hour, hour and a half, or between 1 and 2 hours, however long it goes for. In the first week, I'll be releasing 3 podcasts. This one, 000, which is the description of where the podcast will be going, what my ideas were, and a bit about me. And I'll also be releasing 2 full-length podcasts of interviews with engineers. Following that, there'll be 1 a week. It'll be a weekly podcast, and with the interviews, I've mixed up how I've done it a little bit. Like I've mixed up being quite prepared and regimented with the questions, and then in other ones I've made it more conversational or more unplanned, just so that it flows a bit differently. And that may change again into the future. I think different approaches have had different pros and cons. And needless to say, with all of this, I'd love to hear from you guys with any feedback you've got about anything to do with the podcast. You can contact me at info@productionmasters.net, and I'll most certainly get back to you. in the meantime, you can check out this podcast at productionmasters.net, as well as my band Ice Cocoon at icecocoon.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast at Stitcher Radio. And of course, you can subscribe to the podcast at iTunes, where also, guys, I'd absolutely love it if you'd leave me a review. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. I really hope you get something out of listening to these interviews and that it helps you along your way to achieving great results with recording music, listening to music, making it, all of that stuff. The stuff that we really love. It's all about the love of music at the end of the day. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you really soon.